For those of you who listened when she was on last month, you're going to be in for another treat because it was really a really interesting interview, and she is a fantastic writer, and we're lucky to have her on. So I'm happy to get her back on the air. Doug Newberry's hanging out. He's going to listen in, and he might contribute a little bit. But either way, if you have questions for this remaining hour for myself, for Doug Newberry, for Ellen Brown, get into the chat room at WideAwakeNews.com. and join the folks in chat, and I will make sure I monitor to pull questions out of there as we go along. Now, Ellen Brown, welcome back to the program. For those of you who do not remember, she's the author of umpteen thousand articles, but your latest work is Web of Debt, and you've also authored many other pieces. How many books now? 3? No, wait. 1, 2.
11.
11.
And I'm working on a 12th, which is Public Banking. The Buck Starts Here. I think that's the title.
I like that. The buck starts here. And yeah. I want to get into public banking a little bit, but when Doug was on the first hour, and like I said, he's still on the horn, so Doug, if you want to jump in, just feel free. I posed the question, are we on the cusp of a gathering perfect storm? We talked about, food commodity prices that are skyrocketing, up 50% in corn, or rather 50% of the corn crop is in very poor condition, a 60% increase in corn prices over last month. Same thing with soy, out of control. This is just one segment of, commodities that we need to survive. If we switch focus now to the banking sector, to the financial sector, we see that not only has things not have been fixed since 2008, 2009. In a lot of ways, most ways, they're far worse than they were in 2008, 2009. All we've done is manage to paper over a lot of this fraudulent failure, putting this onerous debt on the back of the citizens, not only in the United States, but around the world. We see the crazy increase in sovereign debt globally. And it seems that we're teetering on the edge. I think you were a little more optimistic than the last time you were on, that we're going to somehow turn the corner. But I just want to get your take real quick and then get into your latest article that you sent me. Do you see any more sense of urgency looking at the LIBOR scandal that just was unveiled here and is ongoing? Looking back not too long ago with the cost of sovereign debt starting to skyrocket, we see MF Global, and we know that a number of these institutions that were once systemic and now completely dominate the economy are all potentially ready to explode with a sovereign debt crisis. And we know that all this problem, all this failure, ends up on the backs of the people of the world. I mean, as it's been a month or so since you've been on, are you seeing any more signs that we're heading into a disaster?
Well, I see it as a good sign that the LIBOR scandal, for example, I mean, that was going on for a long time, well, since 2007 at least, and it's only just now come to light. So the more and more we're seeing that these are actual criminals. We're not talking about negligence, but intentional crimes are going on. So the more people get disillusioned with the whole banking system, the more likely that we'll be able to rise up together. I don't mean in violent revolution, but if we just insist as a very large group that we're not going to take it anymore and that we want something different, I think we're getting closer and closer to that. If you look at other countries, I mean, many countries have changed their systems when the old system didn't work, and it's just obvious that ours is not working, and it's criminal, and that it's sucking the money out. It's going off into these capital accounts that are just growing independently, like little virus or little cancers on the side of the economy. Just they're getting bigger while the economy is getting drained of its blood. So
yeah, no, I agree with that. And this self-realization, this awakening of the malfeasance that's been going on, I think is a good thing. I agree with you, and that does hold out one to have some optimism. What is not so optimistic is how entrenched these institutions are not as being only systemic to the global economy. I mean, let's face it, especially since 2008, these two big institutions that are global. I mean, they're not just here in the United States; they're everywhere. They have become the economy, and they've garnished so much power from the people that, from representative government, that they truly are in a position where they could come hat in hand in 2008 before Congress and ask for a bailout to the point where they're no longer asking. They know that they have sway. They know that they can collapse it, and actually agree with you that if we could have a collapse, a true collapse, and let this system purge itself of all this debt, and let the system purge itself of all this fraud, we would truly, have an Icelandic condition to where we would suffer, we would go through a hard time, but on the backside of it, we would have sound money, we would have a sound financial system, and we would hold accountable a bunch of criminals who have profited greatly up until 2008, and even more so to this day.
Mm-hmm. Or Argentina. You can't get any worse than Argentina. They were absolutely bankrupt. And they pulled out of it, and now they're totally changing their system, where they don't believe the old rules. Instead of worrying about inflation, they're, that's the whole BIS Basel committee thing, that you're supposed to always maintain the stability of the currency, which basically means you can't print money, you can't borrow from your own bank, you have to borrow from the bankers, as if the bankers are lending existing money, but we know they're not. They're lending money that they create. Better that we should be using money that we create. So the Argentinians have seen through all that, and now they're saying we're going to just do what's good for the economy. If we're going to put the money out there. So I think it's great. I think that'll be a new model. I'm excited to see how that works out. That's what we definitely need, is some new models. What I just wrote about was at the county level. It seems to me that's where we can get some change in this country. It's not very likely at the federal level, but we could at the city or county level set up banks, our own banks, and there are a number of counties that are talking about taking properties by eminent domain, and then, which that was very controversial because you were taking it from somebody, and then they would say that was unconstitutional taking. But now we have a new case that just came down that said that MERS, I don't know if you want me to get into that yet,
sure.
But
anyway. Go ahead.
Okay. That MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems, which is this electronic database that is holding most of the more than half of the properties in the country are held in the name of MERS, but you could just guess that the ones that are in trouble, probably most of them are in the name of MERS, because they were all securitized, and they were subprime because the bankers didn't, or whoever, the mortgage company didn't care about, or in fact, they actually wanted subprime. They wanted people to default because of their credit default swaps and all these things that were going on behind this smoke screen. And they didn't worry about things like proving title because it was all hidden behind the screen. Well, now that more and more courts, but this was the Washington State Supreme Court, held that that MERS it does not qualify as a beneficiary under the deed of trust. That means they cannot foreclose. They don't have any rights to assign to anyone else, and that means they can't assign title. That means nobody has title, because to have title, you have to have the original promissory note, or you have to have signed it, and that would be somebody that can no longer be located because these properties have changed hands so many
times, and there's no chain
of securitization. Yeah,
that's right. There's no chain of custody on that title. And I want to touch on that when we get on the backside of this, because we're talking about counties, we're talking about people, we're talking about self-governance, taking these properties back, and then we hear this patriotic fervor about, well, it's unconstitutional, it's un-American. We're going to talk about what's un-American on the backside of this break, because if you don't think that the big banks have a plan to do the exact same thing, you're dead wrong. We're going to be back with Ellen Brown. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm Charlie McGrath, your host. Ellen Brown is our guest for this hour. Doug Newberry is lurking in the background, and he could pop up at any time. You never know. Ellen was talking about, at the end of that first segment, about how a county has wanted to use eminent domain to go in and take some of these homes that have been foreclosed on, and I'm assuming, turn them back over to the people at low interest rate or no interest rate loans, put the people back into their homes rather than have them be homeless or have them have to go rent something. And
Yeah.
And Ellen, I've read this story and I find it very compelling, and I find the argument that somehow this isn't American, this isn't patriotic, this isn't how we operate in a free market capitalist system is a utter and complete falsehood. I mean, it is ridiculous when we consider the same people making this argument are institutions that truly, I mean, we talk about Citi and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. These guys shouldn't be in existence right now. And in fact, a very strong argument can be made that we paid for them. These are essentially could be considered public utilities with the amount of money that the American people have been pledged to pay to keep these guys afloat. And in fact, and I'll kick it back over to you, not only do I think a county or local government using eminent domain to take these properties back that have been foreclosed on, especially, most assuredly, definitely in the case of MERS, where we know that it was a pump and dump scam to get people into homes, even if they can afford them or not, to along with the monetary policy that made these things turn into piggy banks and increase in value by 20, 30, 40% a year, knowing full well that eventually this was going to blow up, and also knowing full well that the failure will be put onto the backs of the people. Absolutely, I think not only is this a good idea, it should be done immediately. But the two bigs, Citigroup, namely in this article, I'll put this into the chat room. Citigroup's new housing plan, own to rent. Citigroup has a scheme going where they're going to take a lot of their foreclosed properties that they've taken back from the people, a lot of them in the MERS acquisitions, or in the folks that are involved in the MERS, and rent them back to the people. And they're trying to sell investment-grade vehicles on the backs of these rental properties. They're just trying to figure out how to crunch the numbers, how to pay for maintenance on the properties, that kind of thing. So, they folks want to use this notion of it's just not the American way to have government step in. And look, government has a purpose. Government has a place. But it's only government of the people that I believe has a place. The government that we have now isn't of the people. It is of these institutions that want to pitch this notion that it's un-American for these foreclosed properties, a lot of them fraudulently, to be taken back by the people.
Right. Well, and we're theoretically a government of laws. We're not a government of dictators, etc. So, and the law says that to convey real estate, you have to have a signed paper with your name on it and with the other person's name on it. That is the law, and nobody can find these papers. They've been purposely destroyed. Even if you could find the original signatory to the contract, they don't have the power to convey it to anybody who actually has put up the money. I mean, you can't tell who has put up the money. And they've done all kinds of nefarious things behind this smokescreen, like leveraging 40-to-1. What they'll do is they'll buy a property and then sell it off to a whole bunch of different investors. It's sort of like fractional reserve lending. I mean, what they're thinking apparently is, well, if we need a house to foreclose on, we'll use this house. And in the meantime, they're just collecting all these payments from all these 40 different sets of investors, and then like they take one set and pay each one by the month out of that, and then they get all the rest of the money to speculate for their own purposes, which is very lucrative for the banks. So we have to know what's going on behind there, and the only way we can do it is to just start over, which means eminent domain, which wipes out title and puts you back to square one.
I got a couple of questions for you, Alan.
Doug Newberry.
Don't you think that the whole scheme of this, the way the mortgage business has been originated, the 30-year loans, and then it all eventually landed in this MERS, sort of a stock market of mortgages? Don't you think that this whole thing, as a legal concept, just screams fraudulent conveyance?
Right. In New York, you could. I mean, I know that's an. You can use that in New York. I don't think you can do it in California. California is a non-judicial foreclosure state, for one thing. This is San Bernardino that's talking about the eminent domain deal.
Yeah, I'm not talking so much about the eminent domain. I'm just like, the whole scheme was basically a fraudulent conveyance. I mean, nobody has a mortgage that was
Right.
ever signed by a
Right.
banker. I mean, these whole documents from the get-go were nothing but fraud, and then they bunched them all into this MERS. And the idea of the eminent domain, I mean, that's something that I think has yet to really play out. But I mean, just the whole concept of the MERS and all that. I mean, it was just fraud, wasn't it? Just flat out fraud.
Yeah.
Well, it was a way for. I mean, they couldn't securitize all this mortgage debt. They couldn't securitize it without having this electronic system, this MERS system in place. They couldn't bundle it together fast enough. So, I mean, obviously, this was created in order to do exactly what we saw come to fruition.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's all for another banking system, the shadow banking system, which is totally unregulated. That's where the large institutional investors park their money, and they're using the real estate, our real estate. They're chopping it up into little pieces as if they were the pawns in a pawn shop.
No doubt about it. No doubt. All right, guys, I want to talk about Ellen's latest article she sent me today. And, of course, it has to do with banking. And do you think you really own your money? We're going to be back with Ellen Brown in 3.5 minutes. Hang tight. Radio, Ellen Brown, Doug Newberry, they're both standing by to continue this conversation. I want to jump to this article because we're rapidly running through this segment. Ellen sent me an article that basically, declares if you think that you own your money, well, precedent law, would tell us otherwise. And I think what you're getting to in this article, Ellen, is you take $1,000 to the bank and you deposit it there. You have the expectation that you could go there and draw out your $1,000 when you needed it, and it's going to be there for you, and it's yours. You have a right to, well, at least you think you have a right to redeem what you've deposited. But that isn't necessarily the case, is it?
No. Legally, it's the bank's money now. What you have, I mean, this is a case going back to 1825, and then there are British cases as well that say that the bank now has the money, and what you have is an IOU, or a promise to pay from the bank, and you have a checking account, which is a service. That's why you do it. You want to be able to write checks. You don't want to have to go down to the electrical company and pay your bill every month. But if you're in a regular depository bank, you're protected by FDIC insurance. So it was really the government that protected you. It's not the bank at all. But actually, I think you sent me the case first. It was that Sentinel case. And in that case, it was not a depository bank. It was a futures broker who was engaged in a Ponzi scheme. So his clients were other futures brokers, and they were making a lot of money off of him because he was paying them by, doing these things that he shouldn't have been doing. So what the court said was that the bank had a secured interest and the others had an unsecured interest, and so the secured interest came first, and that was the holding in that. But still, the fact is that when the bank says, well, we don't create money, etc., what they mean is you gave us your money, and so now it's our money, and we'll pay you whenever we don't say we've got your money. We say that when you come for it, we'll get it for you. Like, if you want it, we can pay you right now. And then at the end of the day, we have to balance our books with the Federal Reserve, through the reserve accounts. And if we don't have enough money, what we'll do is borrow from another bank, because there's always somebody in the banking system that's going to have excess reserves, since that's the way the whole system works. I mean, the reserves follow the deposits. So if you write a check to another bank, the reserves are going to go over there too, and you're going to have excess reserves over there, so you can borrow them back. So basically what the bank can do is create a deposit account, which is how they create money as credit. And then that deposit account becomes a check, which goes into another bank. And then the reserves follow go from your bank over to the other bank, which now has excess reserves. So at the end of the day, you can borrow those excess reserves back. So it's kind of like check kiting, where you go and you deposit a check from an account that you don't really have any money in, and then you quickly juggle all this stuff between accounts so that you manage to.
Sure, and in the banking world, it's not a payday loan where you're going out and writing a check for $100 and then covering it in time, or floating a check, which I'm sure many people are at least if you're 40 plus and you've had a checkbook for a lot of life. A lot of people starting out young have done that. Write a check, knowing full well, hoping full well it'll be in the bank. The deposit will be in the bank before that check clears. But when we're talking these too big to fail institutions, we're not talking $100 here and there. I mean, they're floating trillions of dollars and making billions of dollars in profit every time they do this. The difference I want to try to talk about a little bit before we come up on break is the different kinds of banks. Because you talked about a depository, where you pay a fee to do business there. You put your money in there, and that money is your money, and you are guaranteed that money. And that kind of a bank really just doesn't exist anymore, does it?
Well,
more of a hybrid.
Banks, right. They always lend your money. If you want to just put your money away safely, that's called a safety deposit box. That's about as close as you can get to that. Yeah. Other than that, they put your money into an account that they can lend out from, and that's like the old savings and loans, the Jimmy Stewart's It's a Wonderful Life type thing, where he's lending the money to the neighbors. And of course, he got in big trouble for it, but that was before FDIC insurance, and now that doesn't happen because the government steps in. Well, they stepped in with the FDIC, which is funded privately, but still it's backed by the government and required by the government. Mm-hmm. So it's actually not, your money is actually pretty secure up to it's totally secure up to $250,000 in a bank.
It's totally secure, but you have the government, and let's just say the people. Yeah. The people.
Right, but they are shifting this money between accounts all the time, and they're using it they're doubling it. They're lending out the same money that they're saying is your money sitting there in the bank, and that's what causes the money supply to expand, which is not actually a bad thing. I would say it's a good thing, to the extent that it's always somebody who takes out a loan that makes the thing expand. And if that person needs a loan, they want to build a business, or they want to pay their employees or whatever. Right now it's hard to get credit. It's hard for small businesses to get credit. And I would see that as the problem with having private banks in charge, that they can turn off the credit, or they can direct it into their speculative things or to their cronies, and shut it off from the small businesses that are the people that really should be getting it.
And that's exactly the point. When you have private institutions that become so large and so powerful, they truly dictate, policy. They dictate what governance is because of their power that they wield. And so you have a government, the people, guaranteeing up to $250,000 in deposits. But truly, you have these private institutions that end up with that form of guarantee or bailout, if you will, that is going to be thrown back onto the people, the government. But they're sitting here high and dry and dictating policy to that government that governs and writes laws for their own industry. It seems corrupt. I mean, if you try to explain this to an alien, they think, are you kidding me? You have these private institutions that are trading the people's money, and they're lending it back to the people who deposited to them. And then if they blow up, then the people themselves are going to cover their own losses. And if they destroy an economy, then the people themselves are going to cover this fraudulent failure. It's a system that you talked about. We need changing of the system. We need to look at other alternatives. Doug Newberry jumped in during the break and asked about should these be public utilities? And I don't see a downside to a public utility as far as the issuing of our currency. In fact, I believe our Constitution calls for it. Article 1, Section 8, government, the Congress will determine the value of money and coin money. Why on earth are we still holding on to this old system that is making so few fabulously wealthy at the expense of everybody else.
In fact, the way I would envision the ideal system, we wouldn't have reserves at all. I mean, you're not really borrowing somebody else's money. It's not really necessary for you to dig some gold out of the ground or to find some saver. That's what they say, it's the savers and the borrowers, as if you're always borrowing somebody else's money. But in our current banking system, the way they slash all these funds around, it just makes it look like you're borrowing somebody's money. There's always somebody's money that's sitting there not being used, so they can borrow that money. But that's really where the money comes from, is you are turning your own credit into money.
That's right.
So you have promised to pay it back. So what guarantees this money and this loan is not somebody else's savings, but the fact that you are going to pay it back out of, you show your business plan or your post your collateral or show your job or whatever, how you're going to, that you're credit worthy.
Okay, I want to talk more about public banking, credit. Who does this belong to? Should it be a utility? We use this planet has used pieces of wood, tally sticks, for 700 years in England as currency, as money. We're going to talk more about this with Ellen Brown on the backside of this break. Hang tight. I ended this last segment with talking about, in England for 700 years they used tally sticks, pieces of wood that were given value, and this was used to conduct commerce. The Roman Empire was founded and gained its strength because of copper. They had copper currency that was not in scarcity, and they flourished. So, this notion that money is scarce. Look at the problems. I mean, we can debate if it's factual or if it's a system that's based in principles of economics, called Austrian economics, whatever. But look where it's brought the world. I mean, we could see that the planet right now is on the verge financially of the great abyss, and it is all because we use this scarcity-based monetary system. And it seems that, the planet is ready for a change, Ellen.
Yeah, well, and I think it's the first thing we need is a change in our thinking. I mean, we just need to understand that we have abundance, that we can, all those things that they're scaring us about, all the austerity measures that we have to do because of this debt. First of all, the debt itself is artificial. The federal debt is our money supply, that it's the negative of the positive that is our money supply. I mean, all of our money comes from debt. It's all an IOU. So it originates with the government. I mean, you could picture these tally sticks that are issued by the government as acknowledging, they're like receipts acknowledging the goods and services have been delivered. Or say the colonial script, which is basically just a receipt saying we acknowledge that the soldiers have performed for the people and, done their service, and here's a little receipt that you can then go forth and spend in the community and get your value in return. And that's what money is. So that $15 trillion debt actually balances our $15 trillion money supply. We need not be frightened of it. So if we realize that that it won't hurt us to put the money out there, to start spending on things that we need, education, medical care. And I mean, I don't mean the medical system we have, which is clearly exploiting us, but if we actually aim toward things that really cure and that really keep us healthy, we could do it so much more cheaply and so much more efficiently. And providing for old age, all those things that would give us security. Plus, I think there are ways that we could come up with new energy systems, new ways of using water, just all those things we think are scarce. It's because we're back in the dark ages in terms of science for, how to get the most out of our atmosphere or our environment, because we don't have the money, we think, to invest into developing these things.
Again, it's the clause of special interest that demands that we keep this scarcity-based system alive and flourishing. And the fear, you talked about austerity measures. We're really going to see this, I believe, especially coming up to and after this next election, where I have this. I cringe at the thought when I see Paul Ryan is being touted as the savior. First of all, he's a vice presidential candidate, and we all know what happens to vice presidential candidates. Unless they're Dick Cheney, then they run the world. behind closed doors, but they in most cases they fade away as soon as an election occurs. But the rhetoric that I see being generated in this country right now by the perceived right and the folks that want to follow that crowd is, we got to get our fiscal house in order. We got to, we have to cut all these entitlement programs, cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut all these people on welfare, all the people on food stamps, all the people who are on 2 years worth of unemployment. And, granted that there's a lot of money being spent, billions upon billions of dollars to keep these social safety nets in place. The amount of money that's been used to funnel to a bunch of private bankers eclipses this. 1 month would eclipse probably a decade worth of these social safety net programs. But we see the tone switching to, we got to go after these, this divide and conquer rhetoric. And Paul Ryan, he's a strong proponent of going in and, people who are getting close to retirement age, they should be terrified right now, yet they're jumping on board the red team bandwagon.
That is unusual. You would think the Christian right would be into abundance, into if you can live as the lilies of the field and you'll be taken care of. But instead, there's so much sort of fear and anguish and hand-wringing, it seems to me.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
The sky is falling.
Yeah, if you talk about things about taking care of, and you're right, the Christian right, or at least the people that can consider themselves to be compassionate conservatives, if there's any talk whatsoever of social safety nets of any kind, they literally lose their mind. And Doug and I were talking this divide and conquer rhetoric, this pretending there's a difference between the left and the right. And that's all it is. It's pretend. We're make believe that we're going to get a different outcome with Romney than we have with Obama, than we have with Bush. And the simple fact is, you don't have to listen to me, Ellen Brown, Doug Newberry, or anybody else. You can just look at the results. We get the exact same thing, regardless of what party's in there. And again, you have to look at who is truly running the show. And every single time, it leads to the money and the scarcity of money and the people controlling the. Go ahead, Doug.
Let me just say that, Ellen Brown is one of the great thinkers of our time. And that is to say that the problems that we have are only perceived because of the box that we live in of our thinking. And we could live in a society of complete and total abundance if we could just change our mind and change the way we think about things like money. If we could just change our mind and change the way we think about society, we could do a lot of really great things. And the limits that are placed on our society are placed there by organized cabals who are profiting at the expense of all of the rest of us because they are limiting the way we think.
Thanks, Doug. That was really sweet.
That was really sweet, Doug. You're a sweetheart.
No, it's true though. I mean, look, money is just a concept. It's not,
I agree, totally.
It's just an idea. If we change what the idea is, they've got everybody on the earth thinking that there's some scarcity of money. Money's not scarce. It's not digging it up out of the ground. The stuff is just printed. And money is print all you want.
It's just an accounting system. You're just keeping track. So there's no dearth of numbers.
Very few people, really articulate it in the way that Ellen does, in that it's just merely a construct of your imagination, and it's the limits between your own ears that set the pace for society. And if you could expand your mind, and if you could get away from the decades of brainwashing into the scarcity of the way the economy works, we could live in an entirely different world.
There's no doubt about it. And we talk. Ellen, you started out the program talking about, or at least the second hour, talking about optimism over the scoundrels being called out and being called to the floor for fraudulent activity, criminal activity. We've yet to see anybody go to jail over this or being even put on trial for it. And in my opinion, we won't I mean, if we've seen, if history is a guide at all, we absolutely won't. They'll take care of their own. We might see some lip service to it. You know, even I noticed Romney yesterday in New Hampshire came out and talked about it was, necessary that we audit the Fed. You know, this was the headline in New Hampshire because New Hampshire was a big Ron Paul state, and he wanted to go garner some of that support up there. Well, when you read into the article, he wants to audit the Fed, but he doesn't want to have the independence, air quotes, of the Fed tampered with, or Congress meddling in the affairs of the Federal Reserve.
He thinks Bernanke's doing a good job.
Of course he does. So does Obama. You know, so that there's the fallacy that we have any kind of a difference. There isn't. It's the same, and it's all status quo. So I go back to when you first came on tonight, Ellen, and talk about, this awakening of people seeing these scumbag banksters for what they are. And I truly believe we're at a point in time that is the only solution. Unfortunately, it's going to mean a collapse of this current system. Unfortunately, and the other go ahead.
Not necessarily. It seems to me we could just move over. I mean, let's assume that we pull off this eminent domain thing, for example. And so you could get the properties back. You can do the fair thing if you could put a board on there that is actually honest and give everybody something, even the investors, and you're still going to have a lot left over for the county. Put it into a county bank, put all the county's revenues in its bank, and then do exactly what the bankers do, which is double your money by turning all that money into credit, even though it's still there as deposits. And then, we can do the same thing they do, but do it in the public interest, just to show how it's done. But it seems to me it could be a gradual thing. It doesn't have to be a sudden disaster.
Let me ask one more question, Ellen. Do you think that it's possible, in our wildest dreams, that we could transition to a new way of thinking without going through a collapse scenario?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's what I think will happen, because that whoever they are, have the market sewed up. I mean, it's not going to collapse unless they decide it will collapse.
Yeah.
Because they can manipulate it. I mean, it's amazing that the market's doing as well as it is right now. But Europe's all such a collapse, and still the market just keeps breezing along.
But I think you nailed it when you said they will collapse it when it benefits them. And we didn't even get a chance to get into this, but I do believe whoever they are, we know who they are. They will collapse this market, and they will have this solution of a true scarcity-based, commodity-based currency on the backside of it. That's why we see a lot of people jumping into gold, silver, a lot of central banks. Time to get into that.
Don't you think that collapses are generated in order to create wealth transfer?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. And unfortunately, we're out of time. Ellen Brown, Doug Newberry, congratulations on your new program. Ellen Brown, I can't wait to hear about your new book. We'll get you back on here again next month. Thanks, guys, for your time. I appreciate it. Guys, stay tuned. Jeff Rintz is coming up next. We'll be here tomorrow night, same time, 2-hour format. All right, guys, have a good night. Peace.
Thanks, Charlie.